depending on where you're joining from. Welcome to this week's edition of the Megaport Tech Drop-In. My name is Mike, and I'll be walking you through a brief presentation of Megaport, and then we're going to get into the Megaport portal and talk about our architecture and locations and different products in a little bit more detail. So with that in mind, who is Megaport? Well, we're based in Australia. We have a 10-year history of delivering value to our customers, and we drive performance and efficiencies, and we reduce egress costs so that you're not using the internet, for example, when you're pulling data out of the cloud. We're the easy button for global WAN and connections to the cloud. And why do customers choose Megaport? Why do they buy from us? Because we simplify the WAN. Our sales teams, of which I am a part of it, consist of a sales executive, a solutions architect, which is my role, and a customer success manager. And we're seeing increasingly that the enterprise is becoming diversified, and 77% of our connections terminate to cloud providers such as Azure, AWS, and Google. And 43% of our customers use more than one cloud provider. And so that's what we specialize in, is connecting customers to the cloud and connecting customers to each other. The first foundational level of Megaport is called a port, and we call that the hybrid cloud model. And think of an external connection either from a cage that has a presence in a customer data center, or a last mile connection from a Lumen or a Zayo or a Verizon that connects a customer site to a data center where Megaport is enabled. Megaport is in about 800 data centers worldwide. And so we have an extensive reach, and we work across multiple data center operators. So we're not beholden to any one, which is nice from a flexibility standpoint for our customers, since they're not locked into any contract with any DCO. So the Megaport is actually an Ethernet handoff that terminates to a physical device, and it is a router under the hood. And with that, we can provision what you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen. This blue bar is a Megaport VXC, or in other words, a VLAN. And it is a virtual cross-connect that establishes connectivity to what we're showing on the right-hand side, the cloud. So to break that last mile methodology out a little bit more, to be clear on where Megaport sits, imagine the customer router or CPE on the left-hand side, and this could be a cross-connect to a carrier meet-me room, and then a last mile circuit that's delivered to the meet-me room of the data center where the Megaport equipment lives in a rack. So when you order a Megaport, what happens is you actually can download the LOA, and you give that to this data center provider, and then they run this cross connect, and then this service is established fully through. And then you can build those VXCs or VLANs that I was just talking about. So this is a very typical architecture. It's important because it's a foundational layer, but it is not the only way you can connect a Megaport. And we're going to get into more details about that. Now, cross-cloud is the concept of going from Azure to AWS or Google through what we call a Megaport Cloud Router. The Megaport Cloud Router is a virtual instance, and I'll talk about this more when we get into the portal, but we have locations throughout the globe where we have compute, and the Megaport Cloud Router is a virtual router that lives on that compute. It doesn't require a last mile connection. It's designed for terminating a BGP peer or static route to the cloud, and it is very handy in that you don't have to hairpin back to a data center to get from Azure to AWS, and you can keep it close to a cloud region. Say I could deploy a Megaport Cloud Router in Ashburn, for example, and be close to my Azure and AWS workloads, and not have to hairpin back to a data center, for example, in the East or West Coast. Okay. Now, Virtual POP extends that compute concept just a little bit further into what we call Megaport Virtual Edge. So instead of having a last mile connection, you're actually going to leverage existing internet or SD-WAN to get to a Megaport compute. And on the Megaport compute is a slew of vendors, which I'll show you a little bit more in just a minute here, that can be a firewall, router, or SD-WAN device. So that could be Palo, it could be Cisco, it could be VMware. And we install a license of that provider or that vendor on our compute. And then a customer can build IPsec tunnels to get to the MVE, and then build those layer 2 connections to get to the cloud. It can also be used for cloud-to-cloud connectivity, just like what I was showing you in the MCR. We'll spend a little bit of time building these out, and I'll show it to you in a little bit more detail. Global WAN as a service is a way of interconnecting different data centers using the Megaport backbone that extends globally. And this is very important because it can be a combination of ports and MCRs and MVEs that are connected together using the Megaport fabric, and it eliminates the need for MPLS providers or linking different MPLS providers together, which is a pretty common scenario. This actually is a real customer, name changed or redacted to protect the innocent, but this is an actual deployment that they're underway with. And what they have is Megaport in red and blue zones and diverse zones. We'll talk about this more when we get to the portal, but they're diverse in red and blue across 4 different data centers within the US, Colorado, Virginia, Canada, and the UK. And what we're doing is interconnecting these ports together via VXCs, or the layer 2 VLANs that I was just talking about, but also extending the VXCs to different cloud regions in Canada and North America and the UK, which gives them an incredibly robust and redundant, completely fully meshed network that let them get away from their MPLS provider. And in fact, in a couple of cases, they were able to utilize connectivity from those providers to terminate into a Megaport-enabled data center, thereby satisfying their contractual requirements while reducing their MPLS spend. So incredibly simplified the network, reduced costs, improved redundancy and reliability. So this is, again, a real-world example of a customer. Okay. So let's go into a little bit more detail on those ports. The port, as I mentioned, is a high-speed Ethernet interface, 110 and 100 gig. The 1 gigs are typically not, we've deprecated them for new service, but they're still available in some data centers. Most customers go with 10 and 100, and they connect to the Megaport software-defined network. The Megaport Cloud Router, again, the virtual concept that stood up on compute for ease of connectivity to the cloud. And then, of course, the Megaport Virtual Edge extends that compute connectivity across multiple vendors. The VXC, again, a virtual cross-connect, and that can be extended to other Megaports in between Megaport Cloud Routers and MVEs to the Megaport Marketplace, which I'll talk about here in a bit. Again, just a layer 2 VLAN, very simple cross-connect. Megaport Internet is an offering where you can actually tie an internet transit circuit to a Megaport device, any of the products that we've talked about, and actually extend your internet to from a Megaport data center or from a virtual instance. So very handy to add on there. We also offer Mega IX, which is our internet exchange products in markets throughout the world. We can elaborate on that more. And Megaport Marketplace is, I'll show you in the portal, is a place where vendors and partners have created a presence where you can actually connect to their service using Megaport, either via a service key or another type of private connection. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay. So Megaport Virtual Edge, we're going to spend some time on the portal, but the idea is that you're going to reduce ingress costs and you don't need that last mile connection. You're going to improve your network performance and your security. These are the vendors that I was alluding to that you can put onto our platform. We actually have a couple of new ones that I'll show you when we get to the portal. But there's a few components to the Megaport Virtual Edge, and it's the compute where the license lives. It's the networking component that you're connecting to the VXCs, and then also internet for both management and then also how your IPsec will terminate to the MVE device. So there's 3 components, and we'll walk you through what that looks like when we get to the portal. This is actually a fairly textbook implementation of MVE, where I've got ports in Nebraska and Michigan and also down in Dallas. And I've got branch offices that are regionalized to support this infrastructure. But what you'll notice on the West Coast, I have dual MVEs to support my West Coast operations, but I don't have a physical Megaport presence requiring a last mile here. And this is key because all of these people can access West-based cloud resources from an IPsec connection that terminates on the MVE, and you don't have to use a port in a data center, and I don't have to hairpin that traffic. So this is a very cool implementation. Same thing down in Texas. I have a combination of ports and MVEs, but I can connect my branch offices either last mile or via IPsec. but then I can use the Megaport backbone to get in between regions, keep traffic regionalized, reduce latency, improve performance and resiliency. So a textbook implementation of MVE. Okay. Now, MVE comes in different sizes based on the CPUs or cores, as we call them, and RAM. So you have from 2 to 12 cores and from 8 to 48 gig of RAM. And then what we also will walk through is the internet that's needed for both a management perspective and also to terminate the IPsec, as I've alluded to already, and that's a 20 meg to 10 gig. And I'll show you how we attach that here in a little bit. Okay. So thank you for that brief walkthrough through the portal. And now what I'd like to do is go ahead and, I'm sorry, through the PowerPoint deck. And now what I'd like to do is go into the portal and just show you a little bit about that. Okay. So as I mentioned before, Megaport is a worldwide provider. We're in about 800 data centers worldwide, and this gives you an idea of where we're located. When we're talking about compute products, and I'll sort on this, I'm going to sort on MVE, and I want you to look at what we've got based around the United States. It's about 35 locations. And if we hone in on Denver, and I'm based in Colorado, you'll see that we've got 3 different sites that house MVE compute. And so then I can stand up a license of Cisco Palo or VM on one of these compute locations, and they're actually redundant. So not only do we have physical diversity with multiple data centers, we have red and blue redundancy within the compute of each one of these. So they're separate devices, separate power, cooling, and network. And that's key because if we ever perform a maintenance, we don't want to impact an MVE. We want the ability to utilize the backup red or blue, depending on where we do the maintenance. And the maintenance on the Megaport network typically is every couple of years to keep software and firmware updated. Right? So this is what the compute footprint looks like for both MVE, pardon me, and MCR. And you can see that there are very similar locations of compute, whether I'm talking about MCR or MVE. And then you can see if I click on all, these are all the locations that we have throughout North America. We have 2 different types of locations. Enabled means we actually have physical equipment there, and extended means we have the ability to get to the location where our equipment lives. So as an example, say it's digital realty. Maybe we're enabled in one digital realty site, but we're extended to a different digital realty site where a customer may have their equipment, but then they could order a campus cross connect or metro cross connect from digital realty to get from the enabled location to the extended location. And so it does extend the footprint. So about 800 data centers worldwide where we're located. So now what I want to do is, this is the actual Megaport portal. And if you log in, this would be your instance view of this dashboard that you would see. This is a live environment primarily composed of test accounts that we use for demonstration purposes, but customers can actually see all of their services in this dashboard view, and you can actually filter based on the types of services that you have. Now, we're going to spend a little bit more time in this view here under services, and I have a few things that are pre-built that I want to show you, but it will dovetail off the presentation that I gave just a little bit ago and talking about ports, MCRs, MVEs, and VXCs. All right. So the first and foundational piece that we started with when we're talking about hybrid cloud is the Megaport port. And so what I can do is actually sort by country, and I'm based in Denver, Colorado, as I mentioned. So I'm just going to choose core site, which is in downtown Denver. And I'm going to grab this port. And I want to show you a couple of pieces here. The port speed we're going to choose in this case is 10 gig. And we'll just call this a quick test. All right. Now, ports could be public or private. Most of the time they're private, but you do have the ability to choose either option. And you can put in a billing reference here if you want to. A port is about $600 a month. Sorry for the screen. $600 a month on a month-to-month term. And on a 36-month, it's about $450. Now, in many of our data centers, we do offer diversity, that red and blue zone that I was just talking about. So I have the ability to create diverse pairs, and if it's available, and I can do that now, or I can do it later. But if you think you're going to need diverse pairs, you go ahead and set it up now. It's the easiest way to do it. And I can also lag ports together. So if I wanted to create, for example, a 40 gig port, I could group 10 of them together and create one lag, but it's actually 4 distinct cross connects to make that a 40 gig circuit. So a 40 gig port, pardon me. The break even of 100 gig to 40 gig it's 4 ports actually. So if you look at the pricing here, if I do 4 of these, it's about $2,400. And if I select 100 gig, you'll notice that the price is $2,400. So again, 4 ports of a lag is typically the equivalent of the cost of 100 gig ports. So that's the factor that customers determine when they're building out the network. And of course, including the diversity as well. So if I go ahead and order a port, I'm going to put it in the shopping cart just so you can see what it would look like. And it'll appear here on the left-hand side. And then I can go ahead and select order. And then that port is ready to go once I do that. Now, I provisioned a port earlier. And what happens after a couple of minutes is there actually is an LOA that's downloadable. For people who haven't seen this before, it's pretty special how quickly the LOA appears. This is something that used to take weeks, if not longer. And you could download the LOA. And this is what you're going to hand to the data center provider to give them that meet me room cross connect within the data center that I was showing you in the presentation just a little bit ago. So downloadable in minutes. And once we see light on that port is operational and you're up and going. Now, there is a few different types of connections that I can make. And I alluded to these when I was in the PowerPoint slide. The first one is a connection to the cloud. And we'll walk through that here in a bit. But if I click on cloud, it's going to give me connections to Azure, AWS, Google, et cetera, IBM Cloud. And I can create that layer 2 VXV. And then I can also choose a private VXV, and that would be my ability to connect a port to another port. For example, on my own network. So if I have a port in Chicago and a port in Denver and I want to connect those together, I can create a layer 2 VXV, and that can scale up to the speed of the port. And we just recently rolled out 100 gig VXCs, by the way, which is huge. And we can talk a little bit more about that if it's appropriate. But the point is I can connect those ports together similar to what you saw in the diagram just a little bit ago. Megaport Internet, I've alluded to already. There are multiple locations where you can grab the internet. So if I have a Denver-based port, I could grab Denver Internet and tie that via BGP to my internet port. And that's very, very nice to use as a backup or a primary to your on-prem ISP. Okay. Internet exchange is the IX concept using the Megaport fabric, and you can see we've got points of presence all over the globe, and we can talk more about that if that's something that you're interested in. The Megaport marketplace, this is what I was alluding to, where we have partners and vendors that you can connect to that have Megaport ports established. And I'm going to come up here to the Megaport marketplace so you can see some of the ones that we have in here. Bear with me here while I toggle. And here are examples of different types of providers that are in the Megaport marketplace. One of the storage vendors we use is Wasabi. So if I click on Wasabi, I can see that they've got 8 different ports. And depending on where I want to connect, UK, Amsterdam, or here in the US, I can create a connection and I can tie my port to Wasabi. And what they'll actually do, there's actually an engagement process with Wasabi where you initiate a request with their sales team, and then they do some network information gathering with you. They distribute the IP addresses and a service key. And then once you have that created, then you can go in and build out your port. So just a cool example of the Megaport marketplace. And then a service key is where I can connect to a customer in a marketplace, or maybe I am doing business with a partner that I also know is on Megaport, and I want to connect those 2 services together. So what that would look like is if I'm in this, let's say Miteco is a company that I want to do business with, and I want to connect Miteco back to my environment, this test port here. So what I can do is I can click on service key that I created previously, by the way, and I can grab this service key and I can give it to Elmore Co. here, and I can do a plus connection with that service key. And when I populate the service key in there, the only destination I would be allowed to connect to is the one from Miteco, because that's They created it and they want that connection to go to me. Now we're viewing this, of course, in one instance. Each customer would have their own view, but you get the idea. That would be how I would connect two of those together. So, all right. Megaport Cloud Router. So again, that virtual compute concept, I've actually already created an MCR for test purposes, but I want to walk you through what it looks like to build it out and so you could see what the pricing looks like as well. So if I click on Create MCR, I'm going to just choose the US and I'm going to choose Denver and core site again, where I've established other services. Now, they come in speed total throughput from 1 to 10 gig. So just so you can see the differences in price, a 1 gig is $600 a month, and a 10 gig is about $2,400 a month. So I can go ahead and give it a test name. And this AS number is pre-populated, but that is something that can be changed by the customer. And I can go ahead and add the MCR in the shopping cart, and it will go ahead and build it out. Now, since I've already got one created, what I want to do is just come in and show you what it looks like when we build it out. So it is live, it is enabled, and there's no usage on this because I just stood it up a little bit ago. But if you, sorry about that. You can see that I created a connection to AWS, and the way that I do that is I go to plus connection, and I go to cloud, and I choose AWS. And in this case, I want to choose a hosted connection. And when because I'm going to connect to a direct connect gateway, and I can sort by a region. And in this case, I'm going to connect in the West, and I have a pre-built one from Phoenix, but I'm going to choose Phoenix here, click next. Okay. And I can choose that rate limit from 50 up to a gig because that's the total throughput of the device. I'm going to choose a 50 meg connection for my VLAN, and I do it on a month-to-month term and click next. Now, this is where I am going to put in my IP information. Once I've ordered it, it actually is going to get created in AWS, and I'm going to be able to come back and fill this information in. So once I go ahead and select order, it's going to initiate an API call into AWS. And then, like I said, I'll be able to come back and create this. So let me show you what that looks like when it's done. So when I initiate a connection, it makes its API call, and there is an option when that's provisioning to come in and select it here. And when it's ready to be provisioned, I can click accept. And then the next step is to go ahead and create my IP information. So this is the one I created earlier, and I've already accepted it, but I want you to see where the IP information comes into play. So once I click accept, I can create virtual interface. I go to this connection ID right here, and this allows me to put in my BGP ASN, the authentication key. This is the router IP side. Okay. So this is the IP for the MCR side. And then this is the Amazon side. And so you'll see it's a /29 for each one. So then what I do is I actually copy and paste this information back into the portal here. And I fill in this information when I create that connection. And it's all, this is what I already have populated that I built out before. And then this is where I put in the local IP of the MCR, the peer IP of Amazon. This is the ASN of the Amazon side, and this is the local ASN of the MCR that we're showing here. And then once that is established, then BGP is up and running, and then you can see when I go back into the portal that BGP is available and up. All right, so that's it. So the other, let's just so you can see it, the other type of connection we could create off of this could be, for example, to Azure Express Route. So what I can do, and I pre-built this, we'll walk through this real quick, but I can create an Express Route. Sorry for my screen keep minimizing. We'll go to create. And then what I do is choose a resource group. And Microsoft recently rolled out a couple different resiliency options. We're going to choose one site, but it could be provisioned with 2 express routes to satisfy their SLA. And we're going to provision that in the central US. And we're just going to name this a quick name here. And now this is the peering location is where you actually on-ramp to Azure. So in this case, we're going to choose Denver. And that's where you leave the Megaport backbone and get on the Azure backbone. And you're going to choose Megaport as a provider. And we're going to choose a 50 meg circuit. And then we review and create. All right. So once we've created the express route, then we'll go back to show you what it looks like with it created. This is the one I built just a little bit ago. And this is what we're looking for here. This service key. So we grab the service key, and then when we go into the Megaport portal, we'll go back to services. And under connection, we'll connect through this MCR. And then we'll click on cloud. Sorry about that. Click on Azure. And then we'll paste in that service key. And since that was pre-built and made the API call from Azure back to Megaport, it knows where it's going to go already. And then I can go ahead and click next and order. And you'll notice that the 50 meg is pre-populated because that was what we built on the Azure side. And then I can add VXC. And the process is very similar. Once I make that API call back to Azure, once I clicked order, then I'm able to come into this area here, and the IP addressing I can fill out just like what I did in AWS. Okay. So we're getting close on time, but I want to touch on one last thing, which is MVE. So I pre-built an MVE, but I want you to see what it looks like in the portal. So bear with me one second. All right. So I built a Palo Alto MVE, and I'm going to walk through the steps again quickly, just so you can see what it looks like in its finished state. But I have 2 different internet connections here. One is for terminating my IPsec, and the other one is for management. And I have them labeled as such. You can see that this one is for management. So with that in mind, let's build one out really quick. Okay. So we're going to go to Denver again, and I'm going to build the MVE there. And I'm going to go next, and I'm going to grab Palo Alto. Now, one of the things I would highlight here is you'll notice we've got 6 wind in here now, Aviatrix, and then we just recently also added Cisco FTD, and we've got some new ones that are on the way with Meraki and Palo as well. But I'm going to grab this Palo right here, and you'll see we've got different sizes from 2 to 8, or 2 to 12, I'm sorry, that I was alluding to when I was showing you the presentation. I have to put in a password and an SSH key. And then I also want to get my data plane and management plane VNICs built. And so you can have a total of 5 that are 5 VNICs that are a part of this. So I could have one for maybe an HA pair, maybe for Prem, and just an additional. And you'll want to set those up when you're building it out. And then go ahead and select a term and build it at next. Okay. So now that we've got it built out, what you're going to do is actually add in the internet transit that is the IPsec termination, and that can be up to the speed of the MVE. And then you're also going to add a management component. And so what you're ultimately trying to do is be able to manage this in an orchestrator, in this case, PAN. And so what I'm looking for when I do that is this IP address here. This is for the management side of it. So we'll just SSH into this real quick. And so I've installed the license of the compute on the Megaport platform. I've assigned the internet, and I've created a management plane so I could talk to it, and then also the internet so my branch offices can communicate with this device. And then this allows me to actually get into PAN and go ahead and build out my interfaces from the network side. Okay. So that was a very quick run through. We're literally at the bottom of the hour. Are there any questions in the chat? I don't believe
No question.
So. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Thank you for your time today. We went through a lot quickly. Your account team would love to talk with you more about this if you're interested and go into any of these topics in more detail. And with that, we'll say goodbye and have a great weekend. And we'll talk to you soon.